Very much this segment of Conversations, where I'm very pleased to welcome to the program Ambassador Richard W. Petree. And Mr. Petree is the president of a newly emerging and increasingly seen to be significant institution here in the United States and on the world scene, that being the United States-Japan Foundation. And Ambassador Petree, welcome very, very much to Conversations.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
You've had a long experience in the Foreign Service and with and knowledgeable of the language and culture of the Japanese and Chinese experience, and I wonder if perhaps with that in mind, you might be able to share with us a little of your own historical development. You've been long associated at a personal level or a career level with the Asiatic experience, as it were. Perhaps you could fill us in a little on your own background, if you would.
Well, I'm one of the generation which came out of World War II. During the war, the Navy sent me to language school with many hundreds of other young people and gave me an intensive course in Japanese language. And when that was through, I worked in translation work, one thing and another for the Navy, and when I was finally able to get enough points to get out of the Navy after the war, not having seen any combat, I went off to Korea to take a job for a year or two, and had a wonderful experience. Had a chance to study Korean while I was there to some extent, and learned a little bit about that place. This was all back in the 40s during the military government. By that time, I'd already given up hope and even thought of going back to Des Moines, Iowa and becoming a lawyer for Pioneer Hybrid Corn or whatever I was programmed to do. And I decided that I really was interested in Asia and in this kind of area to work on, and I therefore took myself off to graduate school at Harvard and studied Chinese there to complete the preparation for dealing with at least Northeast Asia. And following graduate school, the Chinese training, I went straight into the State Department in 1950. And I finally retired from the department in '81. And during that period, I spent all but 2 stints in other areas working on Far East in one way or another.
A rich background of understanding, which puts you, perhaps unfortunately in a certain sense, but light years ahead of the rest of us in terms of understanding the volatile kind of change situations. The Asiatic condition and the Pacific Basin condition is just almost abysmally understood by the American society, if that's maybe reaching too strong, but that we certainly do need a great deal more understanding between the two.
Well, I think that's true, but you know, in all honesty, anybody who comes to you saying they know about these things or they understand them, you really ought to think twice about listening to them. I have a lot of gray area, even after all these years of working and studying about understanding. But the basic point is exactly right, or it coincides with the way I think. I think the American people really do have lots to learn about an area that's becoming increasingly important to them. Not just Japan, but Asia as a whole.
And in that sense, and it's very appropriate and timely that the U.S.-Japan Foundation has been founded. Maybe you could share a little bit of the development of that. When it got started, it's relatively new, but maybe share a little bit of the...
In the late 70s, the donor of the principal sum that was made a gift to us, to the United States, talked with many other leaders in the Japanese establishment and expressed, I think, a broadly felt fear that this positive relationship between Japan and the United States, which had developed after the war, was deteriorating very rapidly. You remember back in those days we had the automobile problem and the steel problem and the electronics problem and feelings about Japanese competition, the way in which they were competing, but also the volume and the effectiveness of it, and the way in which it was having an effect within our own society. The feelings were very, very strong, and for the most part it was felt that most of the reactions were so emotional, so unrelated to reality, even in terms of factual knowledge of how the Japanese were doing this or what they sought in the way of objectives, that it was felt from the Japanese side especially that something dramatic had to be attempted in order to try to turn around this education gap, and therefore they made a gift and offered to fund the foundation of our institution to tackle this education problem, and that in broadest terms is where it came from, and that is a definition of what our mandate is today.
Well, fine, and that gap is there, that need of knowledge and understanding of the two cultures is extremely important. Where the Pacific Basin, the trade relationship between Asia and the United States is growing so rapidly, it's becoming so important. I wonder if the overall perspective is not well enough understood by the American society of exactly how closely we are becoming aligned with our traditional European thinking and so forth, but maybe you could spell out some of that.
Personally, I think the shock of these perceptions back during that period 5-6 years ago has had its effect, and in fact it has stimulated a burgeoning growth of interest in learning about the area. We see it in schools and in universities. We see it in the way companies have remade their management structures and have taken new interest in preparing their people for going out to do business. We see it in the closer, even personal relations between President Reagan and Prime Minister Nakasone in the Japan case. We see it in everywhere we turn, this interest. Many of our programs at one time would have had to be sold. We would have to go out and persuade people to be interested in working on an exotic area like Japan or Asia. Now we find everywhere we go, down to the smallest cities and towns in the United States, we find people who are actively beginning to inform themselves. And so I think the level of education has vastly increased in this past recent period. But once having informed yourself about facts, you're still faced with some first-hand feel for what the other people are like, what the culture is, what drives them, how to deal with them, or maybe in the end, what's more important, how to be friends with them as human beings. And at that cultural level, I think the American people probably need another era of continued educational effort in order to make them truly international in the way in which they face up to the world they're in today.
And also then the opening, as it were, or the opening up of the society of China, Asiatic,
China is into the
mainstream of Western thinking, or that's another part of the overall dimension of coming together of the East and the West in a certain kind of way, right? I mean, it's in a major development that's going on. Trade is developing in tremendous proportion with Japan. We're now actually trading more in the Eastern, the Pacific.
Trade with Asia, including Southeast Asia, is now larger than our traditional sources of trade in Europe and elsewhere. And that has brought with it an impact. Once people begin to grasp the significance of this turnaround and therefore the potential in the Asian relationships, including Japan, I think it makes a difference. President Reagan himself fairly recently made a statement about the new era of the Pacific Basin. The American people must learn to turn part of their attention in that direction and not be so habitually tied and focused on the conventional or traditional ties in Europe.
Yeah, as we have been, right? And then that would be fitting right in with your charge in a certain sense.
Right.
Maybe you could share a little bit of the activity or some of the people that are involved. There are a number of people here in the United States of responsible concern and so forth. Is there Mr. Carter, President Carter, Mr. Ford are involved in a...
They are honorary advisors to the foundation, but as you might imagine, they're not imminently involved in the program day to day. We have a board which is divided between American and Japanese members. The American board is headed by Ambassador Angier Biddle Duke, who has been chief of protocol in the White House. but also has been ambassador to 4 or 5 different countries in his career. We have Robert McNamara, former Secretary of Defense, William Eberly, who was former Special Trade Representative for the White House. We have Robert Sarnoff, former head of RCA, Jim Lennon, head of Time Life before he retired, Hank Walder, who's still CEO at International Flavors and Fragrances here in New York. Phil Talbot, who's former president of the Asia Society, but also ambassador to Greece. And Orville Freeman, former secretary of Agriculture.
Joe Tidings.
And Joe Tidings, former senator from Maryland. All of these people are pretty actively engaged in what we're doing, including the contemplation of which projects, what programs, what ideas do we have that can let us have a positive influence on the way in which the relationship goes.
And their counterparts in Japan.
And in Japan, we have the Japanese members of the board are headed by Mr. Saiki, who was head of Nomura Research Institute, which is very famous among many Americans.
Yes.
He's vice chairman of the board. In addition to him, Mr. Sejima, who's an advisor to the prime minister, former vice chairman of Ito and Company, a trading company. And Mr. Nakauchi, who's the CEO of one of the largest of the department store chains in Japan. We have one of the sons of our donor, Mr. Sasakawa, is also a member of the board, a young professor at Hitotsubashi University, and so forth.
Yeah, right. And also past prime ministers from Japan to balance it. Whereas
And
Mr. Carter, Mr.
two
Ford,
of the
and
former prime ministers, Mr. Kishi and Mr. Fukuda, are the balancing Japanese participation as honorary advisors.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, so there's a high level responsible concern by people
That's right.
to develop this. And then the activities you do, you're encouraging research activities. Maybe you could talk some about the activities that you're actually encouraging. What's the ongoingness of what's...
We found, let me put it personally, I found it a very, very difficult thing when you get right down to it. What can you do to affect the relationship between two large, sophisticated, complicated nations, cultures, human societies like ours? And we experimented with many things during the first 2 or 3 years, but now we've settled in for a few years at least in a kind of strategy. And we're basically operating in 3 main areas. One of them is the exchange of persons and ideas, which is a traditional kind of activity. We're principally interested in discovering interest among American groups, people all over the country from all walks of life who could use a better first-hand feel for what Japan is like today. And we offer them trips to Japan to have a look and a study of what it's like. The second area is an attempt to develop a skein of what we call core groups internally, small groups of national level specialists who deal with one or another segment of the relationship itself. For instance, we have core groups working on international financial questions, yen-dollar exchange, the international liquidity problems, the international financial system problems, and so forth. We have another group working on international energy problems for obvious reasons.
Good.
And we are just commencing another group which is going to be looking over an extended period of time into the relationship between the two countries in the area of high technology, with all of the complexity and the dangers and the emotions and the high stakes that are involved in that kind of trade, but also technology-related questions. The third part of our strategy is an effort quite embarrassing in the size of it because we don't know whether we can succeed, but we would like to see if we could make a difference in the level of teaching about Japan in the American public school system. And our first effort at it, now several years old, has been to work with teacher groups in the major regions of the country, establishing networks of people who are interested in this, giving some teachers a chance to go to Japan on their own behalf, stimulating the preparation of up-to-date, accurate teaching materials that go way beyond what is available in standard textbooks, encouraging public education systems, state superintendents, city superintendents, disciplinary superintendents within school systems to take an interest in promoting a drive to bring some balance as between the European focus, which is quite natural and historical in our terms, bring some balance between that and what must be perceived as an important new interest of the United States in the other direction.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what we're doing.
Would you see that in terms of, in a sense, giving cultural exchange and opportunities and so forth to people who are educators, as it were, or would you see it developing what could be like curriculum materials and so forth in that case? I mean,
well, at this point, at least in the pre-college level, K through 12 they speak of in the business, we are dealing principally with teacher and teacher groups and with to some extent with the preparation of materials. So we have given grants for both that kind of activity.
Have you developed mediated treatment of this, film or any of that kind of thing?
No, we're tempted, and we study it, and we haven't found just the right people and the right subject and the right technique for doing it. We haven't done it yet, but it's a natural for the whole problem of how in a modern day you present curricular materials that are relevant to the young people at high school, junior high, grade school level.
Well, maybe something to come out of your finding that.
We're hoping,
because it's all in the interest of trying to have a better understanding between two giant countries that are emerging and need better to understand one another and so forth.
I completely accept the validity of it, and that will be one thing we need to look at as we go down the road.
Do you think that the success, as it were, has been called the Japanese miracle? The success, the Japanese have been incredibly successful in business terms around the, around the world and so forth. Is there lessons by American, the relationship between the Japanese experience and the American experience that we are coming better to understand that, so that there can be an appropriate kind of learning one from the other, and less to the degree that there was a sense of trade animosity or any of those kind of senses? Is it lessening from where it was a few years ago?
Trade competition is not lessening, and in some ways the feelings haven't lessened, but the gradual increase in the amount of information, the amount of education about the other side, I think tends to make the debate or the consideration of how to cope with it more rational. I think that there may be hundreds of ways in which we have and will continue to learn from each other, but in my own view, I've got two things to say. One, I believe that American solutions to our problems are going to be American. I don't believe that there is a golden answer that Japan has that we can transplant and all of a sudden create solution to the trade, the technology, the worker organization, labor management relations, whatever problem you want to talk about. Japan's answers have been for Japan. We must find our own, and what we are finding, and it's moving very, very rapidly, the changes in industry and in business, etc. Our changes, our solutions to these problems are going to be purely American. Therefore, I would say one shouldn't speak glibly about being able to learn one from the other, except in the hundreds of course, minor ways in which one does learn by exposure to another party of that kind. The second thing I would say is that what's, not to go into a long lecture about it, but what has made Japan successful has not been gimmicks or organizational techniques nor hard technology. It's been more a human factor, and it's been the focusing of human beings individually but also as groups because of their society and its organization. The focusing of them on a task. To some extent, one could say that what's happened to us in the last generation or two has been the loss of focus or the loss of a tradition of focused application even by an individual, whether it's homework by a small child in school or whether it's a worker in a factory or an executive on Wall Street or wherever it is, I think there is a difference in the degree to which we have insisted upon the focused effort of an individual, the application of what he is capable of in pursuit of a common goal. We don't have it as strongly as they.
Well, that's really very interesting that they have come to focus and been able to get a great deal of focus on the part of the individual members of the society that's accounted for that. What do you think might have accounted for the fact, if we heard you correctly, that we've in a sense lost that focus, or we're recapturing, or?
I don't know whether I can put it together in all one piece at all. I think most Americans who listen to this proposition and start to think about themselves can understand parts of it. Half facetiously, I've said from time to time that I think the beginning of the unraveling happened when progressive education started to be accepted in the American school system in 1939. But, you know, it gets into simplicities, and it's a complicated thing. War, the frustrations of experiences we've had in the last generation or two nationally, the shaking of confidence, the changes in education system, which now are beginning to pull back and to be changed, the difference in family relationships growing out of the 60s and the way children relate to parents, and the same kinds of factors which have produced unraveling of our traditional marital situations. On and on. It's a complex, of course. It has, and I'm simply saying that in one way or another, for one reason or another, those factors have tended to water down the amount of application or the attitudes towards the work objective or toward the company or the authority for which you are working. And all of that has had an effect on the national momentum or the drive of the people to accomplish what they're doing. Now, I happen to think that one can look around the country these days and see it coming back all over the country. I think a story that hasn't been told very, very properly is the story of what's going on inside American business today. American corporate managers are looking at all of these problems, all the way from manufacturing enterprise to services and other kinds of corporations, and are making changes that are responsive to these needs. And therefore, I think you will find that we are going to be a different competitor in the world than we have been in the past.
We're going to be able to find some of our own roots that would make us a stronger society, if that's the right term, which might be the better kind of person to be doing business with at any event, because we might have been a little bit on the... We lost our way a little bit. We're coming back, and that will make it easier to work out a relationship between two strong partners rather than one that's a little not sure of itself.
I think nobody should sell this country short.
No.
We have got drives and capabilities and willingness that is going to produce a response to the new era that's going to be us, and it's going to be good.
We've had such a long tradition in the United States in terms of our domestic market, and there's such a rich market and development of our own domestic. We hadn't been thinking internationally, perhaps, as we ought, and we're increasingly being made to do that. It's becoming more important to us. We're actually becoming more international in our day-to-day thinking, and needfully so by the business arrangements, and that probably is to the good. It's certainly that we learn about
good or bad. It's absolutely essential.
Well, it's good that we learn about it.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. No, I think that's the world to come. We have to learn how to live in that kind of a world.
In an economically interdependent world, in a very real sense, and so forth. And the Japanese have done marvels in their own right as we're talking about these things. You think that
but Japan's got a lot to learn.
Well, of course, yeah.
Japan speaks of international success, and indeed they have been successful at one level and in several areas of activity. But the truth of the matter is that one of the reigning debates in Japan today amongst young people and intellectuals and others is, in one way or another, a debate about whether we Japanese can internationalize ourselves and still retain our identity as Japanese. Does modernization, internationalization mean that we have to be clones of the Western Europeans and the Americans in every way, including automobiles and everything.
Yeah, right.
Or is there some way in which a unique culture, a unique society like Japan can retain its Japaneseness and still be? That debate shows that they too are on the leading edge of the kind of thing that's happening in the United States.
That's right. There's an initial thrust outward. They have their trading companies, they have their traditions that have given them great advantage, and it's all to the good in a very real sense for them. And it's to be, but then that begins to get established, and there's a certain difficulty because then competition on the international scale gets a little bit different than the initial thrust, and so there's a learning process on their part as well as ours.
Of course.
And if it's abrasive, is probably the wrong term. It's more like the kind of synergy that's being worked out is one that we want to find synergies that are going to benefit them, us, and in that sense, in the world. And that's what you charge.
In the short term, I don't think anybody ought to kid themselves about abrasiveness. It is abrasive. You know, we've got jobs in Detroit we've lost. We've got feelings of companies that go down the tube because they can't really swim right now against the situation as it is partly defined by the Japanese competition. But in the end, one has to come back to the fact that this relationship is not something you can take or leave. It's crucially important to us as a nation. It's something we have to learn to live with, to work with, and with what we are involved with the foundation, but many, many other hundreds and thousands of people in the United States are working at all of the time, is some way to make this effort a constructive effort, so that through the competition, through the irritations or abrasiveness that occur and are natural, that in the end we can come out with a protection of a relationship which is crucial to them just as it's crucial to us. That's the bottom line fact of life.
And that's the bottom line concern in the very real sense of the foundation.
That's
here.
correct.
That's what you're
exactly right.
You're promoting that kind of
right.
understanding, and it's a nice place to be at a certain time now. For you, with your experience,
it's fascinating.
You must be having a good time.
I can't think of anything else I'd rather be doing right now.
And I have a hard time understanding who might be able to serve the role that you're serving here at the foundation. And may I just say, thank you really very, very much indeed. It was a great pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure for you to have had the perceptions of the President of the United States Japan Society, and that being Mr. Richard Petree, Ambassador Richard Petree, who is the current President of the Foundation. Happy to have been able to bring you those perceptions. Sorry we've run out of time for this particular segment. We'll be coming back momentarily. I'm afraid that's it for this particular part of the program, but we're coming right back. Ambassador Petree, once again, thank you very, very much indeed for participating, and all the best with this very fine foundation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening, and welcome very, very much to this segment of Conversations, where I'm very pleased indeed to welcome to the program Mr. Mamoru Tabuchi. And Mr. Tabuchi is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Mitsui Trading Company offices here in New York City. And Mr. Tabuchi, welcome very, very much to Conversations indeed.
Thank you.
The trading company has been very much intrinsic to the development of the Japanese economy and the modern experience. Maybe you could share with myself and the cable television audience the development of the trading company concept in Japanese historical or the economic historical experience of Japan. It's been very, very important to the economic development and the modern experience of the Japanese experience.
Yes, I think so. For Mitsui, as you know, perhaps we started the modern form of business back in 1876. And we established the New York office as the third overseas office then, after London and Shanghai. And since Meiji Restoration started, we had only farming functions, and whoever have the money in hand go on the business. And that's why that unlike Western countries, commercial and trade oriented business started. And with the long history of more than 300 years before we started its modern form.
Mm-hmm.
We traditionally been doing trading mainly, and since Mitsui has been the important role since that time,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
trading company is a rather important function.
Surely would be, and Japan has been intrinsically international in their thinking because in a sense they've had to be in a very
Yes,
real sense,
yes.
whereas the United States has been overly oriented
Yes,
toward its large
yes.
domestic market, and we're just beginning to learn
Yes,
some of the things that you've known for a very long time. In the
that's
sense
right.
that,
That's right.
Uh-huh.
We are Mitsui is doing about $15 billion business yearly,
Mm-hmm.
and consisting of 30% exports from United States and 15% imports into the United States.
Very good.
And
For
30
us, huh?
Oh, yes,
Yes, mhm.
30% offshore and 25% domestic.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a trend very clearly that our business unrelated to Japan has been increased by 10% to 50-50 now.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, in other words, we are more and more international.
International, and have an
Yes,
international
yes. And-
purview
yes.
and a system that is international, and you help in the trading of a wide variety of products. Maybe you could share some of the products that your various divisions are involved in.
Well, we are proud to say that we are a rather steady exporter of U.S. products and merchandise, nearly $5 billion yearly,
Yes, that's,
consisting of U.S. grains, machineries, chemicals, coal, scraps, and aluminum, etc., etc.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
And the number is increasing.
The number is increasing, and you trade with all parts of the world. I mean,
Yes.
it's traded all over the world,
Well,
including to
I'd like to
Japan.
remind you that
Mhm.
our exports mainly to Japan,
Yes.
but elsewhere too.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And it's growing at a very rapid rate as the internationalization in broad general terms of the world economy is becoming more apparent
Yes, yes.
to all of us, really.
Yes.
It's becoming more and more of an international economic
Yes.
order, and the large trading companies such as yourself have in a certain sense been thinking that way for so long, so have lessons for many of us who are more domestically or nationally oriented, don't you think?
That's right. That's
Uh-huh,
right.
uh-huh.
That's right.
It must be an exciting area of business or concern on your part. Yeah.
Yes.
The Japanese have been extremely successful, a miracle, economic miracle in the recent experience, the economic development of the Japanese. We now have a trade deficit that is of large proportion in terms of the United States and Japan, the two major powers. I wonder if you have comments on that, or what the
Well, after the war, we started to reconstruct its economy with the strong support of the United States, for which we are most grateful, with the hope that someday we can stand up on our feet.
certainly have.
And we began with the so-called safe banking system, the banks not to go on bankrupt so easily. And the banks extended the credits and made loans to the businesses which had virtually no capital to get it all started. And through the subsequent continued expansion of economy with the periodic ups and downs, banks and businesses helped each other to avoid failure at bad times and expand when good times. And meantime, Japanese continued its effort to improve the productivity so that we can be competitive in the world market. And now we are, and as you said, that we are on our feet. But some of the regulations relating to banking and monetary system are still remaining, which I think should be liberalized orderly and steadily without causing sudden confusion.
You would certainly be aware of the international monetary situation and so forth, because it relates intimately to the trading possibilities and the trading mentality. I wonder if you're generally concerned. Japan's now in a very, very favorable position in terms of the productivity and overall industrial capability. Are you concerned about the emergence, let's say in the United States or in general in other quarters of the world, of protectionist mentality against a free trade policy for the world economy? I wonder if you wanted to comment on that.
Well, I think especially for Mitsui and other trading companies, and also for Japan, it's essential to keep that free trade practice be maintained, and Japan should do whatever she can to prevent that protectionism, and even with certain sacrifice. This is my personal view.
But the protectionist mentality in various quarters of the world, including the United States, is one that, in a certain sense, do you feel that it might be that there are legitimate concerns on the part of those people, or it is a question of the Japanese are producing really very, very good products, and the people ought to make products that can really compete with those? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. So it is one good approach is to have Japanese companies get into United States as investors, where they produce their products here instead of bringing their products from Japan. And that would help domestic counterpart industries, and total productivity of the United States will be improved.
And Mitsui is doing this.
Yes,
they're investing.
yes,
Maybe you could share some of the dimensions of your investment here in Nepal.
So we have a certain impression that our trading partners, with that respect, become more and more friendly. But sometimes people say very politically. So it's politics all same wherever you go.
Yes. Yeah. But it's to be able to maintain that is a problem. That question of and in general, people are favorable toward the idea of a free flow of commodities. It helps in the long term in terms of finding efficiencies and good international relations, if there can be communication and exchange among the peoples of the world. I mean, it's a general leadership position in a very real sense. The Mitsui is also involved in terms of financial services and so forth, and it's an intrinsic part of the way you approach your charge.
Yes, that is one of the most important functions we have, and also we have a function of the industrial organizer function. Let me give you one example.
Please.
When that oil crisis started, 73, the cost of energy jumped up 4 times. That made that, for instance, aluminum smelting operation in Japan prohibitive. You know that the average cost of the energy is about 60 mil, more than twice as high. And so we used to have 1.65 million tons of aluminum smelting capacity back home in Japan, but we curtailed, scrapped it to 1.1 million tons, and then went on to reduce to 700,000 tons, with the idea that 1/3 of the needed supply be dependent on domestic supply, 1/3 from the secured sources import, and 1/3 outright import from abroad. And in this strategy, we went out to purchase 50% of equity share of the Arimax, which is the 50% ownership Amax has. And that company grew to be actually number 3 U.S. producers after 10 years, and producing 700,000 tons aluminum, and some portion going to Japan for supply to the Japanese market.
It's important.
And meantime, we had to undergo very painful procedure of scrapping down aluminum smelting facilities.
I see. So that was.
This is the one way of our way of coping the changes.
Yeah.
And the way the Mitsui as a trading company worked to help that the change go smoothly.
Help that change go more smoothly, and help economic activity find its way to the most efficient way for it to express itself on a world scale.
Yeah.
And that's a charge of world leadership in a certain sense that could be, in some instances, transcendent almost of the national fix of political thinking, if you understand what I'm saying. You have a tremendous, it's needful because you have a wide world purview and so forth. You have a tremendous need of communications amongst the various offices. You have a very rich telecommunications capability that's intrinsic. Maybe you could just share briefly.
Well, it's necessity for us as a service company with global operations, and we have to know what happened at what place, especially when we do global operation of trading commodities. We have to know the change of the prices and also the change of the exchange rates.
That's right. And where opportunities are.
Yes, that's right. And that is the basic necessity for us to have that function. And we have to utilize that function for customer too. We are not taking full advantage for ourselves, but for the customers who need that information.
Yes, indeed, and it's important. Your service company, the customer has been important throughout the history of it, even on to where you might have people that could become good trading partners if they were able to be helped along or something, and you've been mindful of being able to help people put themselves financially or otherwise in a position to become a market, which have not. So that's been you've been nurturing the market in other places in the interest of what you do, and that in turn has broad implications, doesn't it?
Yes. You know, we have been a long-standing motto that born in Japan, growing in the world. And so we are very positive in pushing our internationalization, whereby we like to keep good customers around, giving services all the time.
And maybe even you can deal with good customers, and you might even be able to help people become good customers when they didn't know they could become good customers by offering a sensitive understanding and seeing potential that they don't even see. So you're developing markets around the world that you're aware of and so forth. And so in that sense, it makes it that makes it an exciting service to develop these kind of capabilities as well. The broad questions of the world seen on an international canvas, as it were, as you do, I wonder if you ever feel that the economic context as a trading company or the economic potentialities of a multinational purview transcends or is offering a transcendent notion of how human activity could be carried out to the political context of thinking? Do you think the business mentality might be in advance of some of the political thing, or the relationship between political and business, internationally conceived business mentality? I just wonder if you could comment generally about the political process and the between the business and the governmental communities.
Well, we always mean good for mutual benefit basis whenever you do business, but sometimes politically may be taken as antagonizing action. So we have to be very careful to invite such political movement at all, because our name has been known for years, so whatever we do, it's very visible. So we are very mindful. But I like to say that we are always doing business with the hope that any attempts we do should be of mutual benefit.
Yes, yeah. You a trading company particularly would be sensitive to that, wouldn't they? Really, yeah. And you're increasingly interested in helping also new companies be able to develop and so forth. That's also a direction that the Mitsui company is moving in terms of.
Yes, especially when that new technology and high technology, including the venture capitals emerging, and we ought to cope with that business possibility by making a very quick judgment and decision here. You know that if we are to follow the lengthy decision-making processes where we have to go all the way back to Tokyo, then opportunity may have gone. So I requested to broaden authority here to make on-the-spot decision.
Oh, very good. Well, then that's good because you're familiar with it so that you can move more quickly and more rapidly in that kind of a context.
Yes.
So it is important then that as we move from the trading companies have been important in terms of supplying the necessary raw materials for the basic industries, which is very important, helping basic industry begin to expand into all the other parts of the world that aren't as well developed. That's important, increasingly that's happening. But it's also important that major companies such as yourselves be mindful of the new high technology and the high technology possibilities. And the Mitsui is becoming more and more interested in biogenetics and some of the high technology issues.
That's right. As you said, these are the two important directions we have to keep the sharp eye on. And although both in U.S. and Japan, the basic industries nowadays are not doing so successfully business-wise, but still it's a very, very essential business.
Yes.
And we like to keep the basic industries as strong as
they need be.
Yes. And also, as you pointed out, Pacific East-South Basin is a potential area for the industrialization, where the heavy chemical industries are most needed. And as a trading partners, U.S. and Japan should get into that business opportunities in developing that area.
We might all be able to get and find better, particularly with the philosophy that Mitsui and other of the trading companies have had of helping along people to find the potential that they have to become good trading partners, there's a role for the increased standard of living and the improvement of the human condition,
Yes.
in a very large sense, could be in the hands of enlightened business leadership, don't you
Oh,
think?
yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
I mean, really improve the human
Yes.
condition, and but the question of moving into the newer areas of biogenetics and some of these new, what our John Nesbitt would have called the sunrise industries, the direction in which information technology, that's important also. And
Yes.
Mitsui has been interested in new
Yes.
entrepreneurial and
Yes.
finding new entrepreneurial
Yes.
capability
Yes.
on a world scale.
Yes.
Mhm.
Being a trading company, we don't actually have ability of evaluating the technology.
Mhm.
To reinforce that lacked function, we established Technical Development Division 25 years ago,
Mhm.
so that they can have sufficient knowledge to serve as a home doctor for the business department,
Mhm.
to direct the specialist as needed to help us.
Mhm.
And that is one a basic structure, and we like to invest as needed to get involved at the high technology area.
Mhm. Because you can see that that is, in a very real sense, much of the economic potential of the future, and that's the responsibility to
Yes.
be
Yes.
involved in being able to see that, and being able to see it from a unique perspective of a true multinational purview that you intrinsically have, being part of this international trading community, as it were. It would
Yes.
seem in a very real sense that that is a leading element in terms of the future economic development of the whole of the planet. Are you generally optimistic concerning the human prospect?
Yes, I'm very positive in keeping my optimism in the future.
Mm-hmm.
One fear, of course, is nuclear war possibility for the mankind. And,
Literally, the destruction of the species, I think, is now within our grasp.
yes,
Huh?
so
Incredible.
that has to be avoided
Yes.
by all means.
Yes.
Other than that,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
other than that, I'm very optimistic.
Uh-huh. And if we do avoid that, and if we find our way through to a truly peaceful world order,
Yes.
the material benefits for the human society are truly almost revolutionary capability we have for improving the human condition over the long sweep of human history,
Yes.
don't you think?
Yes, I fully agree.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Brazil, for instance, has a lot of potential,
Yes.
and I'm very positive that Brazil can be a locomotive of the whole Latin American countries as they go on the industrialization. But we have to be very careful as to watch the timing. If you go on the history, then you cannot expect the return in time. So you have to balance out your capability. But Brazil also has a big potential.
Oh yes, Brazil does, and indeed,
perhaps next century.
Yeah, maybe the next century, or maybe we can help accelerate that movement toward an improved human condition that we can. It would seem to me the work that you've been involved in has been in the leading edge of helping to develop that in good business terms, but also redounding to the interest of the human society. It's an extremely challenging role that you have, and I can congratulate you certainly in the company on the company and all your activity. There's a great deal that we could talk about: the political context, the need of bringing enlightened political. There are still questions to facilitate the interchange of information, and the interchange of material products and so forth could be improved by good policy decisions that are being worked out now. But I'm afraid we can't go into great depth in these questions. But it is an exciting era, exciting and positive, and a time of great challenge.
Yes. Well, it's a changing world, and If you can cope with the changes, we have a lot of prospects of continued prosperity.
There is, between the United States and Japan, two major powers, developing a special relationship, you think, between Japan and the United States, and it's important to maintain and encourage that kind of increased understanding between, in business terms and also in cultural terms, that we have a better understanding.
Yes.
And it would seem to me, I would think that it would be imperative, or in our responsibility, to understand Japan better than perhaps the Japanese have understood us.
It should be mutual.
You think, yeah, that we need to understand that.
That's right.
That more in cultural terms. It would be good to encourage intercultural activities between Japan and the United States, perhaps more than we have, and so forth. Wouldn't you agree?
Japanese has to come to the United States, but not necessarily true for the Americans. So I think that we understand more about Japan than Americans understand Japanese.
Yes, right. That's what I'm saying. We have more to learn, really. We have a great deal to learn. Right?
Well, I think it's, again, mutual things.
Yeah. Well, we have a great deal to learn. I would say that we might have been able to, in a small way here with this interview, to help in terms of us learning some about the responsible leading-edge perception of business leadership as in the Japanese experience. And I just say, I'm sorry we've run out of time, but it's been a great pleasure.
Well, we have learned a lot from the United States.
Yes, well.